experience, which are very practical and very applicable throughout the world. There is no excuse not to use digitalization, the energy transition, and other structural reforms as a means to kickstart development, reduce debt, and break the debt cycle. So that's why we're here today. And we have a very distinguished panel mixing government and private sector, and our keynote speaker will be the minister. So I'll pass the floor to Penelope.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And indeed, it is a great pleasure to welcome each of you here. It's been an excellent collaboration with Greece, and thank you so much, Ambassador, for all your personal effort into making today's event possible. The title of today's session on breaking the debt cycle and the digitalization and other transformations is really very close to the heart of what our division at UNCTAD has been doing for over 60 years. We have focused on interdependence. And I think this particular session, which looks at national, regional, and international aspects of how one actually moves beyond the debt cycle, is very much within that topic. We know that for every aspect of the economy, and certainly for economic growth, we need finance. And with finance often comes debt. But to move out of that debt into a sustainable new path requires, in its term, new ways of economic growth and structural transformation. And that's exactly what we're doing here today. And so I would like very much to welcome Minister Kotsiras, I apologize, Mr. Kotsiras, who is Deputy Minister of the National Economy and Finance of Greece. And we welcome you as a distinguished public servant, but also a man who has a distinguished career in practicing law and even in tennis, which you know is one of the things close to our hearts here in Geneva. So welcome, it's delightful to have you here.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor to address you today here at the Palais des Nations in Geneva. And I would like to thank the organizers, especially the Permanent Mission of Greece in Geneva and Ambassador Mr. Ioannis Gikas for convening this timely discussion on how countries can break debt cycles and build sustainable growth. The Greek experience over the past decade offers a powerful illustration of how a country can emerge from a severe sovereign debt crisis by combining fiscal responsibility, structural transformation, and technological modernization. Our journey has not been easy. It demonstrates that consistent policy choices, institutional reforms, and strong political commitment can restore economic credibility and deliver tangible results. Today, I would like to share Greece's reform story, the lessons we have learned, and the challenges that lie ahead. As you know, 10 years ago, Greece stood at the edge of a profound economic crisis. At that time, our country was widely seen as being on the brink of default and potentially exiting the euro area. Indeed, the Greek crisis was deeper, longer, and more existential than any other experienced in the Eurozone. Today, the picture is fundamentally different. Over the past 6 years, the Greek economy has undergone a remarkable recovery. We have regained the trust of international markets, restored our credibility with investors, and strengthened the foundations of our economy. This turnaround is also reflected in our growing role within the euro area. the election of Mr. Kyriakos Pierakakis as president of the Eurogroup symbolizes this transformation. A country once perceived as the weakest link of the Eurozone is now contributing actively to shaping its economic governance. And the numbers speak for themselves. In recent years, Greece has met its fiscal commitments and is generating substantial primary surpluses, projected to reach 2.8% of GDP in 2026. Growth remains robust, with the economy expected to expand by 2.4%, double the euro area average. Public debt is declining rapidly and is projected to fall below 140% of GDP by 2026, marking one of the steepest reductions in public debt ratios in Europe. Investment has rebounded strongly. Gross fixed capital formation expected to grow by more than 10% in 2026. And since 2019, investment has nearly doubled, while Greece has attracted more than 30 billion euros in foreign direct investments. Exports have doubled as a share of GDP since 2008, reflecting the growing competitiveness of the Greek economy. And at the same time, unemployment has fallen from 70% in 2019 to 7.5% today, the lowest level in the last 70 years. International markets have recognized these improvements, and Greece regained investment grade status in 2023 and is expecting, of course, further upgrades the next years. The foundation of this recovery has been a clear and consistent strategy. As its core lies a firm commitment to fiscal stability, combined with an ambitious reform agenda. Fiscal responsibility was essential for restoring credibility. However, our objective was not austerity. Instead, we pursued a pro-growth fiscal strategy, maintaining discipline while creating space to support households and stimulate investment. And structural reforms have played an equally central role. One key priority has been reducing the tax burden. We lowered the corporate income tax rate from 28% to 22% and reduced the dividend tax rate from 10% to 5%. More recently, we implemented a comprehensive reform of personal taxation aimed at supporting the middle class and addressing the demographic challenges. Now, income tax rates have been reduced across the board, particularly benefiting working people and middle-income households. Tax rates now decrease progressively with each additional child, while young workers up to the age of 30 benefit from reduced taxation. It was the first time that something like that happened. These measures aim to support especially families and strengthen incentives for young people to enter the labor market. The reform also addresses regional challenges. Property tax on primary residences in small settlements is being gradually abolished, and VAT reductions have been introduced in small island economies. These policies aim to support remote regions and counter the population trends. Beyond taxation, Greece has implemented major structural reforms across several areas, reforms that are crucial for both economic growth and social cohesion. These include simplifying investment licensing procedures, modernizing labor legislation, and accelerating privatizations in order to attract investment and create jobs. Perhaps the most transformative reform of all, one that touches upon many of the areas I have just mentioned, has been the digitalization of the state. Digital transformation has become one of the most visible symbols of Greece's modernization. It has played a central role in improving public services while also enhancing productivity. When the government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis took office in 2019, it established a dedicated ministry for digital governance and adopted a comprehensive digital strategy that enabled integration and cross-referencing of public databases, and a cloud-first policy was introduced, and Greece rapidly adopted 5G technologies. The results are tangible. Procedures that once required days or weeks can now be completed in minutes. And allow me to highlight 3 flagship initiatives that could also serve as best practices. First, the GovGR platform, which now hosts more than 2,000 digital public services and has facilitated billions of transactions between citizens, businesses, and the state. Second, MITOS, the National Registry of Administrative Procedures, which provides a single transparent reference point for more than 4,000 administrative processes. And third, the MIDA platform, which will soon be launched and will serve as a unified digital registry for property information by integrating tax data, cadastral records, and utility information. Digitalization has played a critical role in improving also tax compliance. Since 2019, Greece has made significant progress in tackling tax evasion through the use of technology. Electronic payments have expanded rapidly, and retailers are now required to accept digital payment systems. Cash registers are connected directly to payment terminals and to the tax authorities, allowing real-time monitoring of transactions, and citizens can manage their tax accounts through their mobile phone. The results have been also significant. The shadow economy has declined substantially, and Greece's VAT compliance gap has fallen below 10%. These reforms generate more than 2 billion euros annually in additional revenue, resources that allow us to continue reducing taxes while safeguarding fiscal sustainability. The next phase, of course, will include electronic invoicing, digital transport documentation, centralized tax inspections, and the use of big data analytics and artificial intelligence to detect compliance risks more effectively. Drawing on our experience, I would like to highlight several key lessons. First, excessive public debt undermines economic sovereignty and places a heavy burden on future generations. Fiscal sustainability must remain a cornerstone of economic policy. Second, sustainable growth must be based on productivity, investment, and exports, not on debt, and not on debt-driven consumption. And third, technology, of course, plays a crucial role in building an efficient and transparent state. Digital public administration improves productivity, strengthens accountability, and reduces regional disparities. And last but not least, there is a political dimension that cannot be overlooked. Economic success depends on political stability and public trust. Governments must speak honestly with citizens, listen to their concerns, and deliver concrete results. Finally, macroeconomic success must translate into improvements in people's daily lives, higher wages, better services, and greater opportunities. Despite the progress achieved, our work is far from complete. Our priority is to ensure that the hard-earned gains of recent years are preserved. Fiscal prudence will remain central to our strategy. And at the same time, Greece must continue attracting investment, improving productivity, and investing in new technologies. We have already developed a national strategy for artificial intelligence, and Greece is among the European countries selected to host an AI factory supported by the European Union. We are also witnessing significant investment in digital infrastructure and data centers by global technology companies. And equally important is investment in people, increasing labor force participation, particularly among women, and strengthening opportunities in rural areas will be essential in addressing demographic challenges. Human capital development will remain a key priority, including through reforms in education. Energy security is another critical challenge. The crisis we are currently witnessing in the Middle East serves as a strong reminder of the importance of resilient energy systems. Greece already produces more than half of its electricity from renewable sources and is emerging as an important energy hub in the region. Through major infrastructure projects, Greece is contributing to regional energy security while serving as a key entry point of LNG supplies into Southeast Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, Greece's experience demonstrates that recovery is possible even after the most severe crisis, when sound policies, technological innovation, and political commitment come together. At the same time, we are fully aware that sound policies are often the result of cooperation and strategic partnerships. Greece's success is closely linked to its membership in the European Union and the collective efforts of its partners. And the European solidarity, combined with national reforms, has been instrumental in overcoming the crisis. International cooperation remains equally essential, and platforms such as the United Nations Trade and Development and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development provide invaluable opportunities to exchange knowledge, share best practices, and coordinate responses to global challenges. And especially in a period marked by heightened geopolitical turmoil, and particularly amid the ongoing conflict in the Middle East, the importance of resilience and reliability cannot be overstated. In this context, Greece is emerging as a pole of stability in a complex region. Our commitment to economic resilience, energy security, and regional cooperation contributes not only to our national prosperity, but also to the broader security in Southeast Europe and the Eastern Mediterranean. So in times of uncertainty, cooperation and trust among nations become even more important, and initiatives such as today's meeting help build relationships and allow us to contribute our experience to the shared effort of building resilient economies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister, and thank you so much for pointing out that because so often the causes of debt crises are systemic and structural, it's therein that lies the solution, that one has to find a path ahead that is linked to new ways of productivity, new ways of ensuring that there is a capacity to grow where there is growth potential, and to restructure key areas of your, perhaps your vulnerabilities. And clearly what's come out is this notion of focusing on renewable energy and on digitalization provides a very useful departure point for the rest of our conversations. We have had a few changes to our panel this morning, and so unfortunately, our colleague, the economist from the African Union, is unable to join us. He's caught up in a travel complication. And the ambassador of Cameroon will join us as soon as he's freed from his commitments at the WTO. So I think to take the conversation forward, it would be really useful for us to now speak to our colleagues who here represent the private sector. And I think it would be really useful if we perhaps could turn to Ms. Christine Wallier. Thank you. I apologize. I know when you arrive slightly late, it always feels you haven't quite caught your breath, but you did hear the minister talk about this massive push to renewable energy, and your experience for over a decade and a half in renewable energy, sustainable finance, and international energy policy, I think really brings us to a real discussion point of thinking about what was done in Greece, of course, and then also how transferable what occurred there is for in other countries. Thank you.
Here we go. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for being late. I am Greek on one side and I'm American on the other side. I'm going to be wearing the private sector hat today, but technically I now work with Building Bridges Foundation, which is a Geneva domiciled sustainable finance foundation. Core mission is to unlock capital and to redirect capital to SDG alignments. I'm going to thank you so much. I think this is a perfect segue. I worked in the renewable energy space in Greece from 2017 to 2023. And so just coming back off on the heels of an incredibly difficult crisis, as we know, I would like to kind of speak to four things very quickly. Maybe we can open this a little bit more to discussion afterwards. So I think Greece is a particularly useful case, and this is certainly not by accident. This was very much driven by very EU-anchored market reform, strong policy signals, and I'm speaking to renewable energy in a second, permitting changes, grid build-out, and targeted social cushioning. And I think the social aspect is also very important. Let me just go back and just bring a few stats in. Today, I think we have a huge success on our hands with renewable energy. If one looks at the geography of the region, Greece is an incredibly interesting place on the map. I think I don't want to repeat, but just being at this interconnectivity, the nexus of the Middle East, so and obviously on the frontier with the Balkans. So it's a very, very important strategic position within the energy transition. Greece, of course, as we know, used to be heavily reliant on lignite. Lignite being one of the, let's say, cheapest, but also dirtiest coal energy-intensive fuels, and has done a market shift since then. So if I were to just kind of go back into our landscape of 2008-9, when the crisis really deepened until 2017, before the regime, the administration changed, we have a market, let's say, bifurcation. I joined 2018 as a strategic investor. Many international, the capital markets were opening, and many international, Greece became much more attractive as an investment destination. And Greece, I was investing as an American investor coming in to help develop the Greek renewable landscape. Why was Greece so important? Thanks to very, very strong regulatory and market redesign. For three reasons. First of all, Greece very much realized and started putting forward wholesale market reforms, creating, for example, day trading in the electricity markets. They started fast-tracking licenses, so solar and wind licenses, which historically have taken, for example, to start to build a 5-megawatt solar park, which is sort of the norm, would take upwards of 12 months to receive permitting. With the fast tracking, with the acceleration, with the digitization, with e-government portals, with much more, let's say, cutting some of the red tape, we were able to construct from start to finish solar parks within 12 months. And Greece also had it wasn't just renewable energy. And of course, we know that the output tripled within 5 years. What is a very, very important aspect was the whole infrastructure of energy. It's not just the generation, but it's the transmission, the grids. And as we know, grids, if anyone who works in energy transition, grids are the bottleneck. So Greece invested heavily in distribution and also interconnectivity. We have 6,000 islands, which are not obviously all interconnected, heavily reliant on diesel fuel generation. So we have this fantastic, let's say, prototype case where Crete is connected now to the Peloponnese. We have substations now all throughout Greece. So that was a holistic view of really redesigning market reform. All of this in tandem started making Greece very attractive in the capital markets. Greece was obviously able to borrow, and equally so, a lot of foreign investments were coming in. And just to I don't want to go into all the different reforms, but I think a really key aspect here is the just transition, is the social aspect. Greece has one of the highest, or has historically had one of the highest electricity prices, wholesale and retail, because the European electricity market is very fragmented. So energy poverty, let's say, or access to affordable energy has always been a very key issue. And as we know, when electricity prices surge, we have social tensions. So with the function of two elements, lignite obviously coming offline, we had a whole community to start really reskilling, readdressing. So there was a huge aspect placed on the north, on the coal regions, and how to really better integrate let's say, the transition there. And secondly, obviously trying to make energy much more affordable. As we know, Greece is abundant with wind and sun. So alongside the holistic approach, also we look at building out battery storage. So here we are today with what some of the strongest, let's say, renewable energy policies, very much a prototype for EU as a kind of a best case practice. And I want to bring this now to why sequencing matters. Greece designed very purpose-led market transparency. Some of this might be, and I'm speaking with a private sector hat, might be very, very new for, there are a lot of incumbent players in the Greek space, but it became a very attractive destination. First of all, the banks, project finance was available, debt finance was available. The transparency and all of this comes really hand in hand with digitalization. Innovation has become, renewable energy can be seen as a technology play, but there's also been an innovative approach to really driving the Greek market forward. So I don't want to go on too much, but I think there's just three sort of confluent forces here. First of all, very sort of long-term market design where they understood energy security is key, energy affordability is key, and of course, sustainable energy that is not reliant on imports. We know Greece has been very reliant on imports, and the surge of the Ukrainian war and today's energy crisis, ever more, let's say, solid as a framework for investors. So I think on two sides, the Greek domestic capital markets have been very strengthened by these designed energy market shifts, as well as a huge attractive destination, not just for renewable energy, but of course now there's the maritime economy, med tech, biotech. I worked in Marousi, which is our little tech, our Silicon Valley, let's say, of Greece, and ever more becoming really the model of sort of a paragon. I don't know if you want to sort of shift into how this can maybe be taken into other markets. Okay. So now I guess I'll put the building bridges hat on. So I was working, in Greece for an American private sector company called National Energy. So I really saw, let's say from outsider view, how well welcomed. There's an entity called Enterprise Greece that really fast-tracked and helped us be strategic investors at large scale. Now taking a step back where my building bridges hat, and I work predominantly with emerging markets, I think there's, let's say, two perhaps lessons, and this is not a perfect transfer of case, copy, paste, but as we know, leapfrogging and harnessing energy, let's say, reliable, non-imported energy is absolutely crucial. We all are seeing now what is playing out in geopolitical context. Another surge in oil prices, which again will stymie growth, will stymie thereafter. Social tensions, we're already seeing that play out. So Greece, if we can showcase, and I think we have very, very strong cases also of Greek domestic capital markets as well as international, to showcase how a very strong, transparent, no backpedaling, really transparent, long-term sovereign views on energy transition is absolutely key. And I think very transferable, for example, to most, hydro, solar, wind, and other different markets that can leapfrog. Grids is something that I think we all have to examine more carefully. But obviously we have a colossal cost depression in the cost of battery storage. Battery size has now collapsed 20 times in the past 10 years. So now, all this packaged together makes it very, let's say, for any country that needs to come out of a crisis, a recovery, or that really wants to have energy sovereignty, this is really where they should be looking. Of course, EU-enabled mechanisms have been really what anchored Greece and being able to borrow from the EU. Nevertheless, many cases, and continues to grow immensely, and this nexus of innovation and energy.
So thanks so much for that. I'd just like to react a little bit, and then we'll go on to the other speakers. First of all, what you mentioned about grids brought back to my mind the fact that Greece already did what we're trying to do today. We, on an EU level, at the time you were speaking, thanks to Prime Minister Mitsotakis, we had an initiative, and his then energy advisor, Nikos Tsafos, who is now Vice Minister of Energy. So we initiated the whole EU initiative for revamping the EU grid and renovating. That was a Greek initiative. I mean, it was our Prime Minister who pushed the leaders to deal with this issue on the Summit and Take initiative. So we already exported some of this, and that's one thing I wanted to emphasize, that Greece did well, but the main point today is that everybody can do this. This is the point, and this is the message we want to transmit from the digitalization. Just with one app that we have designed in the health sector, we've cut prescription costs for the state by 50%. And we've also made it much more easy for everybody to get his prescriptions, it's also improved daily life, but it's cut billions of euros of cost from the state. And this is something that you can do with minimal investment. So every country can do this.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And thank you very much, Christine, for your very helpful laying out of how really the kind of interconnection between both this need for a shift to renewable energy, how that actually also benefited domestic markets. Of course, you are in a particular region, and that always makes a difference. And I'm sure we'll hear from some of the countries that from other regions as well. But may I please hand over now to Mr. Harris Antonio. It's lovely to have you here. I see from your CV that, not only are you a founder for several companies, but you have actually really had a long-term focus on the role of digitalization, both in your maritime work, but also, of course, in transformative technologies in finance. And indeed, as we see, you are really responsible in many ways for the first fully digital bank of Greece. And so perhaps you can talk to us about how you've used those technologies to enhance the story, enrich the story. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you for the invitation. I would like to thank Ms. Professor Dimitri Podi and Ambassador Gikas for inviting me here. I do feel a little bit like a fish out of the water because I'm the only non-diplomat probably around the table. But I was welcomed. So thank you for having me here. I have two hats as well that I'm going to use One is the heart of digital transformation. The other is the heart of energy transition. And I think Greece is definitely in the midst of the developments in both areas. I would like to start first with our experience in terms of digital transformation, and in particular in the finance sector, because in fact, we have set up and grown a technology company called NATEC, and with it, the technology, I mean, we built the first digital bank in Greece that is called Snappy. And it's actually very interesting because the digital transformation allows you to go really fast and touch areas of the economy and geographies that otherwise would have been very difficult to get to. In fact, to put it into context, why I talk about geography, both companies are registered in a city called Ioannina, which is in the northwestern part of the country, in the prefecture of Epirus. And Epirus is one of the poorest areas in the EU. It's the third poorest area, actually, I think, in the EU, having only 48% of the EU average income as, household income. So it's impressive in a sense that we were able to develop world-class technologies in such a poor area. And I think that goes to show that technology actually can break borders and barriers. We've been able to do this for two reasons. One is that the symbiotic relation with the state always, in Ioannina, there's a very large university that has, many different disciplines, including digital education. So that helped a lot of companies, in fact, start business in Ioannina. That's why our NATEC business is also based there. And the second, of course, is that we rode the wave of the recovery. Although NATEC has been a company that's been around for more than 15 years, the reality is that it was helped by the Greek economic recovery that the minister previously explained, and helped digitize a number of institutions, including banks. So what does NATEC do? NATEC has digital technology that is the backbone of banking operations. It produces core banking systems. So that allows the banks to basically, make payments, issue reports, do the anti-money laundering checks, et cetera, et cetera. We managed out of Ioannina to actually serve a few dozen clients, close to 40 clients, not just in Greece, but internationally by now, and actually reached a level of more than 20 million euros in revenues, annual recurring revenues, which is, again, impressive for a small company which is based in a very small city in Greece. With it, and of course, why does this matter? Because, once we go digital, and I think this is what the government was trying to do, you unleash tremendous energy. A lot more transactions are happening online, and that means that they're real time and they are visible. And visibility creates revenues not just for the companies, but also for the state, because moving away from cash into digital has allowed actually the Greek state to increase the tax revenues and move away from the dark economy. On the back of the technology, I'm going to move on to the banking, if you allow me, business. We built the first neobank in Greece. It's purely digital, mobile only, and it is targeting mostly the younger population, but not exclusively. And again, in the same manner, we managed to actually obtain a pan-European banking license. It's the first new banking license that has been issued in the country for the past 40 years. Because it's not easy to obtain a license in the first place, but a pan-European one is difficult as well. We did it also, of course, because we have Piraeus Bank, the largest bank in the country, as our partner. They're the majority owner, and our technology business is the minority owner. And with it, we managed to actually break the geographic barriers, because we are able to provide banking services to people without any restriction on geography. So the villager from a remote place or a student can get the exact same banking services today that somebody who's based in the most sophisticated Athenian suburb can get. So actually that creates bridges, to use the name of your company, that allow people to prosper. So that's, I would like to stop there basically and just conclude by saying digital transformation is not just about technology, it's about the economy. And it allows economies to prosper. So I, very much think that creating the right foundation for it is very beneficial to economic growth. And I will touch upon, for 2 minutes, if you allow me, upon the other issue, which is very close to my heart, which is the energy transition. The energy transition, not so much on ground, because there are different parts of the economy that deal with it, but more so in the maritime space. We also have a company called Neptune Maritime Leasing, which is here on my name tag. And we set it up 5 years ago to, in fact, help the transformation, the energy transformation and transition of the global fleet. You may know that Greece has approximately 20% of the global fleet and probably close to 50% of the European fleet managed out of the country and out of Greek owned and operated entities. And the global fleet is responsible for transporting close to 90% of the world's goods and about 2.5 to 3% of the global emissions. It's not a lot if we compare it to the transportation work it performs, but it's still nevertheless a significant amount. So we set out to facilitate companies, in fact, go through the energy transition by either building new ships, so we help them with the finance, or upgrading existing ships so that we don't create an obsolete fleet, which would actually have a tremendous impact on the ability of the value chains to operate. And we know now how important value chains are and how important shipping is because of the tragic events that are unfolding in the Middle East and around the world. And in fact, I just came back from the US and I had discussions with the US administration. They're putting tremendous emphasis on value chains and the uninterrupted supply of the trade throughout the world. And the Greek fleet and the European fleet play a very significant role in this. And I would like to stop there. And thank you very much for the opportunity you gave me once more.
Thank you so much for that. It was fascinating, and actually it touched on all these issues that we want, because it's especially the fact that you are working out of Epirus, which is one of the poorest regions, means that this is exportable throughout the world. I mean, we can do this. And as for the energy transition, I mean, the nutshell is that Greece replaced expensive hydrocarbon imports and with a domestic industry, which creates thousands of jobs and wealth.
Thank you so much. And indeed, yes, it's been very interesting to hear. It would be lovely, I'm sure, if we have a bit more time to hear about how the emissions in the maritime world are being reduced as a consequence of some of this work. And also, of course, in the estimation of both you and Christine, how far there is still to go in terms of this renewable energy. And that would be lovely for us to still hear on. But I'm going to change track now, because I think it's very useful for us to bring in our Spanish colleague, Ms. Regina Sancha, who is somebody who has a lot of experience in debt as a representative of Spain at the Paris Club, and indeed a very distinguished diplomatic career, including a term in New Delhi. So you've seen many things in your life. Perhaps if by way of introduction, I can just talk a little about work that UNCTAD has been doing in this idea of debt, development finance, and how one moves beyond. Last year, we were requested by UN SG Guterres to be the secretariat of a group that he established called the Expert Group on Debt. And the outcome of that group was 11 actions to try and move beyond the debt crisis. And the idea behind these actions were really to focus on three groupings. So what could happen at the multilateral or international level, what reforms were necessary, what should happen cooperatively between countries, and then what should happen at a national level. And the Greek discussion that we've been having today, of course, fits very neatly into that last category. But of course, from what we made as recommendations from that group was included actions such as spaces where borrowers could talk to each other and borrowers could talk to creditors. Now, you may be aware that UNCTAD is the secretariat of the Borrowers Platform, which will be progressed very soon, we hope. We have been working on that with a number of member states, but also something that came out of the fourth Financing for Development Conference, which was held in Seville in June and July last year, was a very new and interesting initiative by the Spanish, which has been called the Seville Forum on Debt. And Ms. Sancha really represents that group for us today. And so my question to you is, how do you see the Seville Forum on Debt contributing to conversations like we're having today? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Penelope, and thank you very much for thinking on Spain for this event. I'm glad to be here. And the first thing that I would like to say is to extend Spain's congratulations to Greek for such a powerful example, how you have been able to balance economic growth and a dramatic reduction of the debt burden through all these elements that you have been presenting today: a long-term vision, transparency, digitalization, energy transformation. I'm very happy because we are completely aligned with what the ambassador mentioned. Every country can do it. And we think that Greek example is so powerful that it should be valued, disseminated, and learned from. And what we need now is a space for other countries to listen and to learn from your example. Spain has been looking for a space that combines inclusive dialogue and pragmatic solutions. And for us, this is the Seville Forum on Debt, Seville Forum on Debt. As Penelope mentioned, it emerged from the fourth international conference for Financing for Development, FFD4, hosted in Seville, and officially announced here. Hello. Just a few months ago, in October, in the 16th UN Conference for Trade and Development. The main idea of the Seville Forum on Debt is to have a permanent space for frank and candid debate on debt-related issues. Who will be invited? The idea is to bring together not only creditors and international financing institutions, but also we want to place a special focus on academia. We want to have academia there, but the most important element is that we want to have borrowers, that borrowing countries and debtor countries, and we want to give these countries a prominent voice. The Seville Forum on Debt will focus on helping to monitor and follow up the commitments that we all made in SSD4 related to debt. For us, the SSD4 was a success because we have not only
Hello.
the
No, come on, man.
AI.
No problem, yes. We have not only the consensus reached in the Compromiso de Sevilla, but also the Seville Platform for Action. That was a coalition of the willings presenting high impact initiative. So we believe that SSD4 was a success not only in participation, but also in this collective achievement that was and is a difficult international contest. So for us, for Spain, host this conference was a privilege, but also a responsibility. And now what we intend is to focus on following and implementation of these commitments. For this, the Sevilla Forum on Debt will be this space for follow-up and implementation of debt-related issues. This forum will contribute to best practice learning and capacity building. We want to analyze what worked and what didn't work. And that's why the Greek case can be such an important case to present. And finally, the idea is that all the ideas in this forum can fit the working group that is consolidating the set of principles on responsible lending and borrowing. The Seville Forum on Debt is a Spain-led initiative that is critically supported by UNCTAD and UNDESA. Spain wants to act as a facilitator, and we want to focus on implementation, but one country cannot act alone. So we count on the UNCTAD long-standing experience on debt problematic and all debt-related issues, together with UNCTAD credibility as a convener of borrowers and furthermore a bridge with the global UN ecosystem. We believe that together we can learn how to break the debt cycle through inclusive dialogue and pragmatic solutions. And together in this Sevilla Forum on Debt, we can work to honor the commitments that we all made in Seville and ensure they translate into genuine progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And indeed, when one talks about debt, I know that sometimes we talk about debt as if it's always bad. And our view always in UNCTAD is that there's really no country in the world that has developed without some debt. But the issue is, how does one create the economic conditions to service it and to ensure that it actually leads to a path of growth and transformation? And so part of that indeed is to analyze best practice and also to see where experiences can be transferable. It now gives me great pleasure to welcome Ambassador Ehith from Cameroon. We're delighted to have you here. I'm sorry you've missed so much of what was being said by the minister, but really he was talking about the role of structural transformation in Greece as a path to further development and breaking a cycle of vicious debt. And so we really are very warmly welcome you here and very keen to hear your views from the perspective of Cameroon. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I sincerely apologize, Excellency, Honorable Minister. You know, Cameroon is going to host in 2 weeks the MC14 next ministerial. So we had the General Council. I'm the current chair of the working group on transfer of technology. I had to make my report. And then it was difficult to move. It was a clash of calendar. And as soon as I did it, and then I rushed and came. I sincerely apologize. So, first of all, Excellency, let me welcome you. And also, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to Ambassador Leonis Kiaisisie for organizing with UNCTAD this important and relevant roundtable, and thank him for kindly inviting Cameroon to take part in this discussion on a crucial issue of debt sustainability and a way to achieve a lasting solution. You know, for many developing countries, particularly in Africa, the debt burden remains one of the main obstacles of the economic transformation. The mobilization of resources for development and the achievement of sustainable development goals is still a challenge. According to the estimates by international institutions, Africa public debt now exceeds more than 1.83 trillion, while more than half of African countries are either over-indebted or at a high risk of indebtedness. In several cases, debt servicing now accounts for a larger share of national budget than spending on health, education, or productive investment. This situation is reminiscent for the historical dynamic that led from the year 80 to year 90 to the imposition of the what we call structural adjustments program. I think you heard about that. On many African countries under the aegis of International Monetary Fund and World Bank. These programs aim to restore macroeconomic balances following series of debts, made in particular by falling commodities price, deteriorating terms of trade, and growing budgetary constraint. You know, I started work in 1989 when I entered Foreign Affairs Services. So immediately it was what they call the shutdown of price of raw materials, and the international organization said that it's because of we had structural problem. We had to adjust our debts, so it was too difficult because we have a heavy debt. So while these reforms have in some cases stabilized economics and restore macroeconomic balances, they have also highlighted the need to go beyond fiscal adjustment to promote deep structural transformation capable of supporting sustainable and inclusive growth. So in this regard, Greece's recent experience offers to us an interesting example. I was not here, my colleague is here, I think he's going to report. Even so, the concept note, I am going to learn a lot on the report of Honorable Minister. So I was saying that the experience by Greece offers an interesting example of an integrated reform trajectory. In the wake of a major financial crisis, the country embarked on a series of ambitious structural reforms. We learn about what your country did, combining administrative modernization, digital transformation, a legislative reform aimed at improving economic competitiveness and public finance management. One of the key elements of this transformation has been the strategic use of digitalization, which has significantly improved public revenue collection, reduced administrative costs, and enhanced the efficiency of public services. The digitalization of tax and administrative procedure has also helped to increase transparency and trust between the state and business and citizens. In addition, the simplification of administrative procedure and the modernization of the regulatory framework have created a more favorable environment for investment, thereby simultaneous economic growth and contributing to greater fiscal sustainability. Several lessons can be drawn from this experience for developing countries. First, I think sustainable reduction in debt burden necessarily require structural transformation of economy based on productive diversification, industrialization, and strengthening of productive capacities. Second, the digitalization of public administrative is now a strategic lever for improving economic governance, mobilizing domestic resources, and reducing administrative efficiencies. And third, the energy transition and investment in sustainable infrastructure can become important drivers of economic growth and attractiveness for investment. In the case of my country, Cameroon, this approach is reflected in particular in significant investment in hydroelectric, for example, in terms of energy transition, which is one of the country's main energy assets. In recent years, several major infrastructure projects have been commissioned or underdeveloped or are under development, including, for example, certain dams like the name Lompanga, Mevele, which are helping to significantly increase the country's electricity production capacity. These structural projects aim to support industrialization, improve access to electricity, and strengthen competitiveness on Cameroon economy. At the same time, as in many developing countries, fossil fuel resources continue to play an important role in the energy mix and in mobilizing the budgetary resources needed to finance development. For these countries, the energy transition must therefore be approached in a balanced and gradual manner in order to reconcile climate imperative with legitimate development and industrial needs. As far as my country is concerned, macroeconomic consolidation and prudent debt management efforts are part of a reform process that has been underway for several decades. To conclude, since then, Cameroon has continued its effort to maintain debt sustainability while supporting the investment need for economic transformation. These efforts are part of the National Development Strategy 2023, which focuses on industrialization, economic diversification, the digital transformation of public administration, and the development of energy and productive infrastructure. However, the challenges remain considerable. This is why the response to the debt issue must also be considered from a multilateral perspective. This implies, in particular, strengthening international cooperation, improving access to concessional financing, and a comprehensive review of the international financial architecture in order to better meet the need of developing countries. And finally, this discussion, I think, provides an important platform of promoting dialogue between policy makers, international organizations, and development partners with views to sharing experience, identifying best practices, and promoting innovative solutions that reconcile debt sustainability. Excellency, I think when I reached my colleagues, I heard so much what she said. I can imagine the importance of this discussion, and I think we are going to learn more. Thanks so much. This is my contribution I made. This is a very relevant topic, and we are happy to be here. And once again, thanks so much, Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And Cameroon will be the center of the trade and economic world in 2 weeks. So it's very important for all of us. Greece will also have a high-level delegation there. Our Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Theocharis, he's also responsible for external trade. And we wish you the best success in this. Now, just to raise 1 or 2 points. One of the things I would like to see from today's discussion is what Mr. Andoniou said earlier, how a digital bank can provide sophisticated banking services to anybody, whether he is in Greece or whether he is in Cameroon or whether he is anywhere else around the world, and how this sort of aspect of digitalization can be really used to spur economic growth, which is also a way to reduce the debt cycle. The second thing that came to mind while I was listening to you was how in Greece we had, at 2010, our debt burden was 125% of GDP. In 2019, when the current government took office and they put in place this tailor-made plan, a Greek plan, because every country knows its own needs, the debt burden was 209% of GDP, which means that in the intervening period, about 10 years, it had gotten much worse. despite the efforts of international institutional actors. And to my mind, I'm not very sophisticated in economic matters, but it means that the whole system that we have currently is not working. Because when a country is heavily indebted and wants to break the debt cycle, the international system cannot help it. And this was proven by Greece. It was only when we got the situation back into our own hands that we broke the debt cycle. So that's one thing that I did.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and both of you, for your very helpful interventions. The point that you raise, Ambassador Gekas, about how the issue of the stock of debt can grow, of course, has a lot to do with what's happening with those terms of that debt. And we find, for example, that when we look at the least developed countries, what we've been seeing for a period of years, but certainly last year in our external debt sustainability and development report that we do for the General Assembly every year, you can see there that for the least developed countries, in fact, their debt stocks grow very little. So in fact, their debt stocks grow maybe 3 or 4%, whereas the debt servicing has been doubling. And so the problem is here is that you have countries not able to really exit that cycle, as you've pointed out, because they have to compromise on development to service that debt. They don't want to renege on what the markets are doing, and so they need new ideas and new paths out of where they are. Perhaps we could open the floor for questions and comments. We still have some time, and I think we have a very rich exposure of ideas here.
Mr. Antonio, so being a practical person, what I would like to ask is, how can we make a space where every country can be facilitated in developing digital banking services like the ones you outlined before? I mean, how can we help this to spread?
Thank you, Ambassador. Well, in fact, Africa's case as a whole is very interesting because they kind of leapfrog the landline telephone system to go directly to mobile. And in fact, that infrastructure, which is there today, facilitates the implementation of digital systems for banking. And I think a number of countries have made progress. We're also servicing banks in Africa, in Nigeria, for example, or in the Middle East, which goes to show that what is needed is customization and systems that are of a cost structure that allows a local economy to support. If one tries to implement very expensive, overly sophisticated systems in a country or an economy that doesn't need them, then invariably that will result in failure because either the cost is going to be too high and therefore will not be able to be amortized, or the service levels will be at such a high level that won't be really needed in the country. So you need to go, I suppose, with a level of service which is customized for the needs of the country, which is similar, I suppose, to what you said earlier about Greece. And that is something that NATEC Banking Services has been doing already in Greece, but also, as I mentioned, in the Middle East and Africa. And the second issue is how does one manage to create a more extrovert economy? Because I think Greece's success to a certain extent is also based on the fact that we looked, outside the borders of the country to develop businesses that do not only touch points of the Greek economy, but also international. So energy transformation clearly is one of those. Interconnectivity grids is a different one. Energy security, which is becoming important, is a third one.
Just ask a follow-up question. Is there a regulatory, is there a need to simplify the regulatory framework so that a bank operating in Cameroon can also operate in South Africa, or to create economies of scale or something like this? Are there obstacles like this? Ambassador, if you have.
So as you said, I'm also like you. I'm not a specialist of economy, but with my general culture, I think I can give more information. And I spent many years in Cameroon. I know how we function. Today's economy are interconnected with modern tools, and the example I wanted to take is the money transfer, for example, with in relation with the digitalization in Africa. For example, today we don't need to go to the bank with this mobile or any computer instrument. They can easily transfer money to one person to another. It depends on the country. This is the illustration of the speed of the digitalization system. And then now I think it's very important today to institutionalize it and to see how we can codify with banking process, and even with banks. It works with local banks, and I think there is interconnection with so many African countries. There is this tool installed in Africa. We are implementing. This is the free trade continental area. In French, we call it VLECAF. Is to facilitate the trade between African countries. And when we talk about trade, we talk about transfer of money, we talk about digitalization to accelerate the digitalization process. So I think the willingness is there, the structure is there, we are implementing it, and I think very soon, having the example of a country like Greece, I think we are on the process to develop it. I can answer your question. Thank you.
Sorry, I'd like to ask you a question. So,
Yeah,
okay. So, please feel free to say what you like. But my question is how do you democratize the energy transition? And when I mean that, I mean how can any country sort of attract capital and create the right conditions to exploit its potential, right? So that's that's what.
Yeah. So I think if we look around the room, we know very much that every geography, every country has its particular, let's say, energy profile. I'm looking across, Spain, very similar to Greece, wind, solar, abundant. I'm going to just take a step back. I think there's two things. Just first of all, I work in climate change and really trying to pursue energy transition and make sure that we're on course for net decarbonization pathways. But in today, it became a very polarized discussion, as we know, very divisive. You can see just to the US to see what's happening with ESG and all the backlash and, the backpedaling of massive amounts of investment, moving away from EV, clean energy, and so forth. At the state level, at the national level. State level, more gigawatts coming online in Texas than anywhere else. But with that being said, I think that the narrative really has to be energy sovereignty, ergo brings growth, brings national competitiveness, and ultimately impacts communities, the social aspect, affordability of energy, access to energy. And that's really the story that we're really trying to push forward, moving away from reliance, and we can talk a little bit about the value chain shifts, but really trying to ensure that, and it's almost like a natural economic investment case. Countries really need to leverage, and there's so many different solutions in this mix. More sophisticated markets are looking at micronuclear, what we call nuclear modular. Of course, the whole spectrum of renewable energy, geothermal, hydro, wind, solar, and all the spectrum. Just to answer succinctly, not to get to digress, at the end of the day, we all know that we will have some countries will be, and the fossil fuel transformation, the transition takes a long time. We have all selected gas to be our transition fuel. Now, gas is only in certain parts, as we know, and tend to be in precarious regimes. But in this transition, I think it speaks to what our colleague from Spain, and we say an investor needs to have long-term vision, predictability, enabling frameworks to attract capital, and lastly, this perception that risk, you want reward, you want to invest financial return, but that risk is mitigated. So, attractive investment destinations really should have that transparency and long-term predictability. And I just want to speak, if you don't mind, to Ambassador from Cameroon, because in this transition, the value chains are shifting rapidly, as we know. Any solar park or wind will now need critical minerals and immense amounts, abundant amounts of resources that we did not necessarily have in the fossil fuel economy. So in this shift, and we have to look a bit more holistically, working through perceived risk. Africa is a continent of 54 very different countries. And I think speaking in the hat of a mature market investor, it's really working through that risk. And, whether it's blended finance vehicles or de-risking with multi-development banks and so forth. But I think there's some really interesting examples. And Greece, of course, had the enabling mechanism of the EU, to be able to have that blended. But I think this really can be exported into many different, and importantly, to have the trade ministers in the room, climate ministers, and of course, finance.
How would we create a mechanism for this risk factor, which we had the EU to use, but it's not available to all countries? So how would we design such a mechanism?
Well, it's a very good question. I don't know if I have the answer, but I think that what we need is this inclusive dialogue where all countries can sit together and learn from the experience of the countries that reach these achievements, and try to implement these solutions in those countries that share the same objectives. Foremost, I think that we need to look for pragmatic solutions. And that's all.
Thank you. Perhaps I can jump in here because I think there's a very useful theme that has been introduced by several of our speakers, and that is around really access to concessional finance, because I think that is what you're saying, Christine, where you talk about the EU mechanisms. The ambassador has himself explicitly mentioned that as a need. We recently had an opportunity to engage with the European Investment Bank and had a look at their GEMS database. Of course, we often look to multilateral development banks and also, of course, national development banks for that concessional finance. I find it very interesting looking at that GEMS database. This is the database, for those who don't know, from multilateral development banks around the world. There are 29 of them whose data is gathered. And what was really intriguing for me was that they have a default rate of less than 1%, 0.7% on average, and their repayment rate is in excess of 96%. And of course, many of their clients are in fact in these risky areas where regions and countries have been determined as very risky. And yet it's very clear that in fact, from the data of MDBs, first of all, it may be that they're not offering sufficient concessional finance, because those rates seem very extraordinary. One even wonders if they got the memo about being banks. But those rates are very small. And so one wonders, are they doing enough? And then secondly, if they are extending to these very risky countries, are we in fact, are we imposing a kind of a wrong perception around risk? so that in fact the finance is not concessional in the way that we'd like. And perhaps Ambassador, you can start with that and then we'll look to Christine. Thank you.
So I think this is a very critical and very complex situation. Yes, you know, as I mentioned in my presentation, many countries, for example, certain countries are considered as a risk depth of investment. That's why sometimes the service of debts, the rates very high. And it becomes very complicated to engage any process really from the target of development. That's why I think that's why it's very important to look alternative, many other opportunities. We're talking about energy transition. Let me come back to it. We're experiencing that. You know, we have realized that we have a lot of opportunities in our countries in terms of, for example, hydroelectric capacity, green, solar energy. Excuse me, I apologize. The difficulties is to tackle a sustainable way, a sustainable channel, how to engage the process of development without any increasing the level, the rate of the indebtedness of the country, because we are struggling. As I said, when we prepare the budget in the country, the services of debt is still high, and then now we have to engage the development policy. We have to see how we can cover the services of debts. So it becomes difficult, and as I said, with the different, with the modernized tools, give us opportunities to learn. And I think the experience of your country is very thoughtful for us, and to see how we can manage and to cover our solution, because the service of debt, private debts, with multilateral bank, institutional bank is too high, and is very difficult for our economy. Let me stop that. And you know, it's a difficult. Sometimes I miss word because I have to explain everything in English, but fortunately I have to. Okay.
No, I was just going to retort on two comments. I mean, I think we'll be discussing at this more philosophical level, the borrowing, the system, the financial architecture, as we know it, is far from perfect. And how do we, you know, whether we have Bridgetown Initiative in the room, but it really needs to be completely rethought or perhaps re-leveled. And that's a discussion for another time. But in today's current context, it's, I think, ultimately what creates an attractive investment destination. And we have more private sector here. The private sector is going to get us where we need to be. I think that's really, with obviously a lot of the development funding shrinking and a lot of, you know, sovereign debt increasing, the private sector needs to step in. But how do you crowd in that private sector at scale investment? And that, I think, is what, you know, is really interesting in this conversation, because it's really working through perceived risk, because ultimately there's amazing investment opportunities and high reward, and investors maybe need to see this. In particular, I think, and it's really these inclusive conversations. It's for the first time when I go into climate conferences, we have trade ministers and finance ministers. It's really connecting what needs to be done and to design a holistic market reform, very much what Greece did in 2019. And so, you know, for me, it's against being an energy transition. It's affordability, first and foremost, accessible, affordable energy for the communities, people on the ground. And obviously, security, sovereignty, and sustainable energy. And that's realizable by any geographic profile. Yeah.
I just wanted to add something to it. You know, lack of capital, lack of industry, and even with new, how do you call it, renewable energy or in energy transition. That's the difficulties. And then we have the service of debt, lack of capital, lack of resources, and to invest and even to borrow money in the or in the private sector of the multilateral bank or international bank institution to conduct a project of development because of debt, because of these difficulties I raised. I totally agree with you. We have a lot of possibilities, a lot of raw materials, even critical minerals, but how to borrow money because the rate is very high. We used to have what they call in those days Club de Paris, Club de Londres, and to private, and then so it's become difficult for to handle all these things. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, we just have the floor for Nepal, and then I'll bring back. Oh, you're responding to this comment. Please go ahead then.
Yes, maybe it's another debate, a broader debate, but I just wanted to jump in because indeed many developing countries are servicing their debt, but they are not servicing their people. They are spending less in health and education, and I think there is a possible, well, among all the tools that we have the debt swaps. When you still don't have the international finance or the private finance, you have a short-term tool that is debt swap for development or debt swap for nature, where you can transform the debt that the borrower have for development projects, always aligned with the priorities of the countries. For example, Spain, we have a long experience with this debt swap. We have already in place 17 debt swaps and 50 in total in the past, and the feedback is always very good from the side of the debtor. With this transformation of debt into project, you can focus on the country. Yes, and talking about the initiative from Seville, there is also an initiative, the Global Hub for Debt Swaps, together with the World Bank, where we aim to create a repository of knowledge with all this information of the possibilities that debt swaps can offer for countries to address these challenges and this time of projects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And allow me to give the floor to Nepal.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the panelists for their exceptional presentations, especially in Greece for their impressive experience sharing. I think my question would be best addressed by Mr. Vice Minister. And though today's discussion focuses mostly on the internal reforms, but my questions pertains more to the external environment. The 2008 financial crisis that was triggered by the housing market bubble and burst of the United States, and I believe Greece was one of the hardest hit country in the Europe. And it's good to hear a lot of improvements being made or done by the Greece. My question is, what sort of policy and institutional reinforcements has the Greece put in place so that the Greece economy could be immune from any such extraterrestrial, I mean, the crisis and risks that doesn't necessarily comes from within, but from outside? That's my first question, because integration is not only a source of my question. Okay. My question was, what sort of policy and institutional reinforcements have been put in place to protect the Greek economy from that kind of crisis that doesn't necessarily emerge from within, but from outside. And because integration is not only the source of strength, but it also could be a source of vulnerability. That's my first question. My second question, you said that some of the policy effects are due to strategic and policy coordination and cooperations. And you also outlined the importance of the Greece's coordinations within the EU that helped Greece to ameliorate its debt crisis. So my question would be if you could elaborate some of the strategic and the policy coordinations and cooperations you had within the EU that helped Greece to come out of these dire situations. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I would like once again to thank you for giving me the chance to present Greek experience. And Greek experience maybe is a powerful illustration how we can break that cycle through combination of fiscal responsibility, structural transformation, digitalization. Of course, Greece is a member state of the European Union, and the structural and institutional reforms, of course, are very critical so as to can tackle the challenges, the geopolitical challenges, in a more collective way. And that's why I mentioned before that the election of Mr. Pierakakis as the president of the Eurogroup is not only a big symbol of this effort, but also in a substantial way give us the chance to create policies for the Eurozone, for the European Union, and especially in a very difficult period, a very complex period in a geopolitical way. We should be very careful in our choices, and we also should be very, we should focus on collective decisions in a more European way and in a more international way. That's why I mentioned our role both in the European Union and the international level. Greece is also a non-permanent member of Security Council of United Nations. So that's why we are by nature a pole of stability, and we try to protect not only Greek economy but also European economy from every for any danger for the period. So I think that we could be optimistic, but of course we should be very careful because we live in a very turbulent period, not only for the European Union but also for the whole of the world.
Thank you very much. Is there any follow-up from our colleague? Right. Perhaps I could switch the conversation again, just because I think it was so important, this role that has come from several of the speakers of the role of climate transition, energy transition. And of course, for many countries, there is this concern about the just transition, this idea that we are aware that as we displace the means by which certain communities have developed their own livelihoods will be changed dramatically. And so I would love to hear more about that role in the Greek switch to renewable energy.
I'm not tech challenged. Perhaps that's better. I'll just speak to two specific examples, and I'm just looking through it. First of all, transitions are never linear. As we know, they can be very disorderly, very lengthy, and very messy. And I'd love, our the Greek specialist here, but just to take a particular example, Greece, when we speak to the Western Macedonia region, which is just under the borders with Bulgaria and Albania, former Yugoslavia, is let's say our only energy natural source, lignite, coal, cheap coal, affordable coal, and obviously created many, many jobs we're talking now 2 generations post-war. How do you transition this? How do you transition this in an orderly? And I think we look to many examples. Greece, again, it comes down to this long-term vision. Incredibly, I cannot emphasize this enough. I mean, administration's 5-year cycle mandates, but nevertheless, this idea that to move, let's say, to a new age or a new economy, we will have to make some cost-benefit analysis and trade-offs. The just transition for me really comes down to the narrative, and I speak to this again. If we go back to the 1980s when we're the cusp of the new tech ages of PCs and different technologies, and you cannot turn back technologies and new ages. And so now we find ourselves, and I don't think it's just an energy transition. Does that mean? It's a transformation of economies. So we see it as me from a private sector would say in Greece, it's particular in grid infrastructure, critical infrastructure, and energy resource renewable. It's a technology. It's moving into a new age. And of course, there will be those who will have to be reskilled or have to adapt to a new economy. It's not easy. Greece did a tremendous amount of investment in that region. First and foremost, one of the largest solar parks was built up there. A lot of education, but it's ultimately not an easy transition. And there will be many, who are close to retirement age, to be blunt, who may not be finding it that amenable to stay in the job force. But at the end of the day, I think when one looks to long-term transformation, this is really a transformative economy. It has to be reckoned with, and I think it was well addressed, and perhaps even a model of a best case that can be, and there's a lot of, let's say, academia, a lot of sort of platforms that we were using to really make sure that this was well addressed. Yeah, but it's certainly not easy. Yeah.
So thank you so much for today. We'll be wrapping up now. Just very, very briefly to summarize our discussion, I think we've seen how Greece can give us some lessons, what our task is now is to make sure that these lessons are disseminated and applied on a much wider scale in order to have a just transition, in order to have to unleash the potential of the private sector. The role of the private sector is crucial, and digitalization is a crucial facilitator for that. And I think we all need to do some collective thinking, how the Seville Forum, how other structures can really support the needs of the global community, because we are one economy and we are completely interdependent. So let's close on that note. And thank you so much for your participation today. And thanks to UNCTAD, because UNCTAD exactly is one of the fora, one of the frameworks which we look forward to your having an even more active role in implementing what we've sort of discussed today.
Thank you.